I'm sitting in a lawyer's office watching the biggest check of my life being signed, $92,000. The pen scratches across expensive paper like sweet justice writing itself. How did I get here? My HOA treasurer, Patricia Moorfield, thought she could bankrupt me over deck railings she personally signed off on. She believed she could ruin my life over home improvements I had written authorization for. But Patricia made one critical mistake. She didn't know I keep receipts for everything. Every email, every fine notice, every humiliating public meeting where she treated homeowners like criminals. Fast forward 4 years. I'm holding a settlement that's bigger than 2 years of my salary. Guess whose insurance company is cutting this check? That's right, Patricia Moorfield's HOA management firm. She had absolutely no clue what avalanche she'd started when she picked a fight with the wrong plumber. So, what would you do if your HOA tried to destroy your credit over approved home improvements? Tell me in the comments what state you're watching from. Let's see how many people have survived HOA hell. My name is David Chen, 48 years old, licensed master plumber, and I thought I understood pressure. Turns out I knew nothing about the kind of pressure that comes with a treasurer's badge and unlimited spite. After my wife Sarah's cancer treatments drained our savings, I needed a fresh start somewhere affordable for my teenage son Kevin's final high school years. My 17-year-old had already endured enough upheaval watching his mother fight for her life. I wanted peace. Maple Ridge Commons looked ideal. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained homes, the sound of lawnmowers humming on Saturday mornings. The house was solid but outdated. Those original 1978 deck railings were a liability lawsuit waiting to happen. Rotted wood, loose spindles, 40-year-old construction that violated modern safety codes. I researched replacements for weeks. Composite materials, code-compliant height, color matched to the existing deck stain. Here's where I made my first error. I trusted the approval process. I submitted my modification request like a responsible homeowner. Photos, building specifications, contractor licenses, the complete package. The HOA had 45 days to respond. On day 42, I received my approval certificate. Request approved for installation pending standard compliance review. Crystal clear, stamped by the Architectural Review Board. Professional contractors, city inspections, everything above board. Those railings looked incredible and finally made our deck safe for Kevin's friends. For exactly 18 days, I thought I'd joined the perfect neighborhood. Then Patricia Moorfield decided to wage war on my wallet. Patricia was our HOA treasurer, and she controlled Maple Ridge like her personal fiefdom. Insurance adjuster by profession, vindictive enforcer by personality. Picture someone who'd turn homeownership into psychological warfare because she enjoyed watching families break. Short gray hair like steel wool, reading glasses on a chain like armor, voice that could strip paint. I was grilling burgers for Kevin when my phone rang. Mr. Chen, your unpermitted modifications are completely unacceptable. Patricia, I have written approval right here. Approval was preliminary pending final board compliance verification. I examined my certificate. No preliminary conditions listed anywhere. Where exactly does it state that? Click. Thursday evening, I entered that community clubhouse with my approval certificate and naive confidence. Terrible mistake. The room reeked of stale donuts and broken dreams. Patricia sat at a head table like she was conducting a military tribunal. Your deck modification violates established community guidelines, she declared, pushing a violation notice toward me like a court summons. I raised my approval. You've already given permission. Permission doesn't equal final acceptance. Her stamp pressed against another form with the finality of a judge's gavel. $750 fine, 45 days to pay or face additional penalties, $750 for following their written rules. I scanned the room at my neighbors. Every eye avoided contact. The silence felt suffocating. That's when reality struck me. Patricia wasn't maintaining standards. She was establishing dominance. The violation notice included a warning wrapped in bureaucratic language. Penalties increase monthly until full compliance achieved. I spent that night reviewing my HOA documents, calculating the financial disaster Patricia had unleashed. Month 1, $750. Month 2, $1,500. Month 3, $3,000. My post-medical bills budget couldn't withstand this progression. Attorneys demanded $8,000 upfront just to examine my case. I faced financial devastation either direction. Fund Patricia's escalating extortion or pay lawyers to challenge her. But here's what Patricia didn't understand about plumbers. We diagnose leaks for a living. When water pressure drops, we inspect every connection until we locate the source. And I was about to discover that Patricia Moorfield had been bleeding this entire community dry. The shocking revelation came while researching my legal options. I I drove through Maple Ridge documenting identical deck modifications. 52 homes with the exact same composite railings I'd installed. 52 neighbors who'd never received violation notices. Patricia wasn't enforcing community standards. She was operating a selective punishment scheme, and I'd somehow become her prime target. The question haunted me. What made me different from those other 52 homeowners? I was about to learn, and that answer would expose everything. Patricia's retaliation arrived swift and merciless. 3 weeks after challenging her at that community meeting, I discovered a collections notice lurking in my mailbox like a financial death warrant. Property assessment line for $3,200. My coffee mug trembled as I read the itemized breakdown. The original $750 fine had multiplied into a monstrous debt. Processing fees, administrative charges, legal costs. Patricia had turned bureaucracy into a weapon of mass destruction. The real devastation was buried in the final paragraph. Outstanding liens may result in forced property sale to recover community debts. Forced sale over railings she'd personally approved. I contacted Robert Kim that afternoon, my 71-year-old neighbor who ran the most organized workshop in Maple Ridge. His voice dropped to a whisper when he answered, and I realized Patricia had targeted him previously too. "David, I was praying you'd reach out. Patricia visited last week asking detailed questions about your financial situation, whether you seemed stable after your wife's illness, whether Kevin appears to be thriving, whether you properly maintain your landscaping." Robert paused like he was afraid of being overheard. "She's constructing a character assassination." Then came the bombshell that shifted everything. She destroyed me 2 years ago, claimed my storage shed violated setback requirements. I'm 71 years old, David. I dismantled the shed rather than fight her in court. Following that conversation, I spent the entire weekend researching Wisconsin property law on my laptop, the blue light straining my exhausted eyes. That's when I discovered something that made my pulse quicken. Back in trade school, our instructor constantly emphasized, understand the code before you install the pipe. Apparently, HOA liens follow identical principles. You must understand the legal requirements before filing the documentation. Wisconsin law was unambiguous. HOA liens require formal legal notification with a 45-day cure period. Patricia had bypassed directly to lien filing. Her entire threat was constructed on legal quicksand, and she was gambling I wouldn't recognize the difference. The following morning, I traveled to the county registrar's office basement. The location smelled like generations of decaying documents and shattered aspirations. But hidden within those files, I uncovered Patricia's catastrophic error. Her lien was missing 4 mandatory legal forms. She'd taken shortcuts because she assumed a working-class plumber wouldn't comprehend property law. Incorrect assumption. I photocopied everything, submitted my formal objection, and departed with my first legal victory, energizing my system like perfect water pressure. But Patricia was far from surrendering. She scheduled an emergency board session to redefine deck policies. When I arrived at the community clubhouse, the atmosphere itself felt charged with Patricia's desperation and that perpetual stale coffee odor. "The board has concluded that previous approvals were granted incorrectly," she announced, reading from prepared notes. "All non-compliant deck modifications must be corrected within 90 days. I stood up, my work boots echoing on the tile floor. "You cannot retroactively invalidate approvals, Patricia. That constitutes breach of contract. Mr. Chen, you are disrupting this meeting. No, you are exceeding your authority. I held up my research like evidence in a trial. Your lien is legally invalid. You never provided proper notification under state law." Patricia's complexion shifted through white, then crimson, then something approaching violet. This session is concluded, but the damage had spread. I'd humiliated her before the remaining board members, and Patricia Moorfield hoarded resentments like precious metals. The backlash arrived immediately. A debt collection agency began harassing me. Midwest Recovery Associates, some operation from Milwaukee that specialized in intimidating homeowners. "Mr. Chen, you owe $3,200. We can freeze accounts and garnish paychecks. That lien is invalid." I filed a legal challenge. Our client disagrees. Rest became impossible. Kevin noticed during dinner his 17-year-old intuition too sharp for comfort. "Dad, you look like you haven't slept in weeks. What's happening? How do you explain that the neighborhood enforcer is attempting to steal your house?" I pulled him into a hug instead. "Just some complicated adult bureaucracy, son." That's when I began my documentation campaign. I transformed the basement into a research headquarters. Timeline spanning one wall, copies of every communication, photographs of decks throughout the development. If Patricia wanted to engage in games, I'd master the rules more thoroughly than she understood them. The breakthrough occurred when I started analyzing her enforcement patterns. 52 homes with identical railings. but the violations followed a disturbing logic. Every targeted homeowner was either elderly, minority, or blue-collar, like me. Patricia's golf club associates received polite warnings for identical infractions. I was witnessing systematic targeting disguised as community enforcement. Then Patricia unleashed her ultimate weapon, an expensive HOA attorney from Milwaukee. His initial letter arrived on letterhead that probably cost more than my daily earnings. Formal demand for immediate compliance and remittance of all outstanding assessments, now totaling $4,800. Patricia was escalating pressure, betting financial stress would destroy me. She had no comprehension she was teaching a master plumber how to trace the biggest leak in community history. Patricia's expensive Milwaukee attorney specialized in intimidation tactics. His correspondence arrived on ivory letterhead that probably cost more per page than I earned per service call. Notice of intent to initiate foreclosure proceedings. Your client has 45 days to satisfy all outstanding obligations or face sheriff's auction. Sheriff's auction. Those words hit me like grabbing a pressurized pipe without shutoff. That weekend, I collected my camera and measuring tape for the most critical plumbing job of my career. Except instead of diagnosing water leaks, I was documenting discrimination. Home by home, railing by railing, I photographed every composite installation in Maple Ridge Commons. The scent of fallen leaves crunched beneath my boots as I walked streets I thought I knew. What I uncovered made my blood pressure spike. 52 homes with identical railings to mine. Mrs. Rodriguez on Oak Avenue, married to the hospital administrator, had the precise same manufacturer, same design, installed the same week as mine. Not only did she avoid violations, the HOA newsletter actually featured her community-spirited improvements. 4 blocks away, James Washington received devastating fines for identical railings. His offense being a factory supervisor who'd recently moved from the inner city. Patricia's violation notice labeled his railings inconsistent with neighborhood visual harmony. Same railings, different consequences. The pattern was undeniable. Back home, my basement transformed into something between a detective's evidence center and a plumber's diagnostic station. Photographs covered every surface, connected with colored wire to a community map. Green pins for Patricia's allies who received warnings. Red pins for people like me who received fines. The red pins revealed a story that made my hands shake. Wednesday afternoon, Robert Kim called in hushed tones. "David, I discovered something you must see. Can you visit discreetly?" Robert's garage smelled like motor oil and decades of careful documentation. He handed me a cardboard box with shaking fingers, his eyes checking the driveway like Patricia might be monitoring. I preserved everything from my shed violation battle 2 years ago. I hoped maybe eventually someone stronger than me would need this evidence. Inside that box was dynamite disguised as correspondence. Email exchanges between Patricia and board members that would make a discrimination attorney's career. One email stopped my breathing. "We must be calculated about enforcement actions. Focus on elderly residents and minority families first. They typically lack financial resources to mount effective legal resistance." Financial resources. Patricia had profiled me from the beginning, assuming a widowed plumber couldn't afford justice. "Robert, why didn't you fight this? This is clear-cut discrimination evidence." His weathered hands folded the box closed. "Because I'm a 71-year-old Korean War veteran and Patricia Moorfield controls this place like her personal dictatorship. Who would have supported me?" That evening, I researched fair housing law until my vision blurred from screen fatigue. Apparently, selective HOA enforcement based on race or economic status violates federal law, not merely HOA regulations, but actual felonies with serious consequences. Patricia wasn't simply being a community tyrant. She was conducting an illegal discrimination operation. The next morning, I contacted Wisconsin Legal Services with hands that wouldn't steady. The intake counselor's tone sharpened when I described my evidence compilation. "Sir, if you can prove systematic patterns, this becomes a federal fair housing violation. How much documentation have you assembled? 4 boxes complete with photographs and timelines spanning 6 years. Preserve everything. Don't communicate with anyone. We're assigning a civil rights attorney today." Attorney Lisa Park met me 3 days later in a conference room that smelled like fresh coffee and approaching justice. She examined my photographs across the table like a detective reviewing crime scene evidence, her expression brightening with each piece of documentation. "David, this represents textbook housing discrimination. Selective enforcement, economic profiling, racial targeting. Patricia violated approximately 8 federal statutes." Lisa leaned forward, pointing to the timeline I'd constructed. She made one critical error targeting a master plumber. "What's that?" Master plumbers know how to trace problems to their origin. Most people see individual violations. You documented the entire corrupt operation. But Patricia wasn't capitulating. Her attorney filed for emergency foreclosure, claiming I posed immediate community threat. The expedited hearing was scheduled for Monday, 6 days away. Kevin discovered me Sunday night surrounded by legal documents and cold coffee, preparing for the battle of our lives. Dad, you look absolutely terrified. Is someone actually trying to steal our house? I embraced him closely, inhaling his familiar cologne. Remember when that senior Marcus kept taking your lunch money until you finally reported him to administration? Yeah, and he got expelled. Sometimes bullies don't stop until someone forces consequences. Patricia's been taking people's lunch money for years through fraudulent violations. Tomorrow I'm reporting to administration. Kevin squeezed my shoulder. Perfect. Marcus needed that lesson too. Monday morning arrived cold and overcast. Walking into that courthouse, carrying 4 boxes of evidence, I spotted Patricia across the corridor in her expensive suit and arrogant expression. She believed she was confronting a frightened plumber. She had no idea she was about to face a federal discrimination lawsuit. The courtroom felt arctic, but perspiration still rolled down my spine as Judge Sandra Williams reviewed the case documents. Patricia sat perfectly erect beside her attorney, radiating the confidence of someone who'd never lost a legal battle against a blue-collar worker. She was about to discover that arrogance and accuracy aren't equivalent. Your Honor, Patricia's attorney began, Mr. Chen has deliberately violated community covenants for 2 years. The HOA has demonstrated extraordinary patience, but continued defiance endangers neighborhood stability. Extraordinary patience. I nearly burst out laughing. Then Lisa Park's turn arrived. She rose deliberately like a professional gunfighter and detonated the first explosive. Your Honor, we're filing a federal fair housing countersuit. The evidence demonstrates systematic discrimination targeting elderly and working-class residents. Lisa opened my first evidence box. We have documented proof of selective enforcement spanning 6 years. Judge Williams's eyebrows elevated sharply. Patricia's attorney went ashen. This wasn't supposed to involve discrimination. This was supposed to be routine HOA foreclosure. But the real earthquake occurred when Lisa presented Robert Kim's email collection. Your Honor, we have internal HOA communications explicitly discussing targeting strategies based on residents' economic status and capacity to mount legal defense. She read Patricia's email aloud. Focus on elderly residents and minority families first. They typically lack financial resources to mount effective legal resistance. The courtroom became completely silent. Even the bailiff stopped moving momentarily. Judge Williams leaned forward, her expression transforming from routine boredom to intense focus. Patricia's face cycled through bewilderment, terror, then something approaching fury. She leaned over to whisper frantically at her attorney, but the destruction was expanding like water damage through drywall. Your Honor, Lisa continued, 52 homes in Maple Ridge Commons have identical deck installations. 0 violations for residents connected to the HOA treasurer. 100% enforcement against elderly and working-class homeowners. Judge Williams called a 45-minute recess. Patricia's attorney spent those 45 minutes on his phone, probably contacting his errors and omissions insurance. When court reconvened, the judge's demeanor had completely shifted. This court is gravely concerned by allegations of discriminatory enforcement. Mr. Chen, your foreclosure case is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm ordering a comprehensive investigation of HOA practices and referring this matter to the federal attorney's office. Patricia's empire collapsed in real time. The arrogant expression dissolved into something resembling panic as she realized this wasn't merely about my house anymore. Federal prosecutors meant criminal investigations. Criminal investigations meant potential prison sentences. Exiting that courthouse felt like the first warm day after endless winter. But Patricia wasn't surrendering. Desperate people resort to desperate measures. The harassment intensified immediately. Anonymous complaints flooded the city about my unlicensed plumbing work at home. Code enforcement appeared 4 times in 3 weeks, discovering nothing but costing me valuable work hours for mandatory inspections. Someone I couldn't prove it was Patricia, but obviously reported my van for commercial vehicle violations in residential areas. Parking citations materialized mysteriously even when I was parked legally. Then came the threatening phone calls. Heavy breathing, disconnections, warnings muttered in disguised voices. Abandon the lawsuit or face serious consequences. Standard intimidation techniques that might have succeeded against someone without 4 boxes of federal evidence. The final straw occurred when Kevin called me sobbing from school. Someone had contacted his guidance counselor expressing concerns about his home environment and possible neglect due to father's legal difficulties. They involved my 17-year-old son in their war. That night, I sat in my evidence room examining 6 years' worth of Patricia's documented abuse. Phone logs, emails, violation patterns, financial manipulation. She'd been controlling Maple Ridge Commons like her personal kingdom, eliminating anyone who didn't conform to her vision of appropriate residence. But buried within those records, I found something that transformed everything. Property tax records revealed Patricia owned 2 rental properties in Maple Ridge through an LLC named PM Properties. Properties she'd never disclosed to the HOA board despite explicit conflict of interest requirements. Properties that had identical deck violations she'd ignored for her personal financial benefit. One of those rental properties had the exact same railings I'd been fined for installing. Not similar railings, identical. Same manufacturer, same style, installed by the same contractor. Patricia hadn't merely been discriminating against working-class residents. She'd been manipulating property values to benefit her real estate investment portfolio. The scope of her corruption was staggering. Selective enforcement suppressed property values, creating purchase opportunities for her investment LLC. She'd been systematically gaming the housing market using HOA authority as her instrument. I called Lisa Park at home. I found it. The smoking gun that connects everything. What did you discover? Patricia owns rental properties in the community, properties with the exact railings she's been finding other people for installing. Lisa's silence extended for several moments. Then, David, you just transformed this from a discrimination case into a federal RICO investigation. Patricia's been operating a criminal enterprise. Patricia Moorfield thought she was battling a simple plumber over some railings. She had no idea she'd just activated a federal task force. 5 weeks after the federal referral, I was sitting in my evidence room at 2 a.m. when the connections finally crystallized. Sometimes the biggest discoveries happen when you're not searching for them, like finding a hidden leak in the most unexpected location. I'd been examining 6 years of county property records, cross-referencing HOA board decisions with real estate transactions. The aroma of burnt coffee filled the room as my printer labored overtime, producing deed transfers and assessment records. That's when I identified the Shell Corporation. PM Properties LLC, registered in Nevada, had acquired 4 properties in Maple Ridge Commons over the past 5 years. The registered agent was listed as Paul Moorfield, Patricia's husband. But the real revelation was the timing of these acquisitions. Every single property had been purchased within 8 months of receiving substantial HOA violations. The Washington House on Pine Street. James received relentless fines for railing violations, landscaping citations, and mailbox infractions. The pressure drove his family to sell below market value. PM Properties appeared with a cash offer 25% under asking price. The Anderson Rental on Elm Street. Elderly couple received citations for driveway repairs, exterior painting, and garden shed placement. After 2 years of escalating fines, they sold to avoid foreclosure. Again, PM Properties purchased at massive discount the Kim property adjacent to Robert. His late wife's memorial garden supposedly violated residential aesthetic standards. The harassment continued until Robert's son convinced him to sell and move to senior living. Guess who purchased it? My hands actually trembled as I followed the money trail. Patricia hadn't merely been discriminating against working-class residents. She'd been systematically terrorizing homeowners to create investment opportunities for her family's real estate portfolio. But the smoking gun was documented right there in the property files. 1847 Maple Street, purchased by PM Properties 2 years ago for $52,000 below market value. According to the listing photographs, this house had the exact same composite railings I'd been fined for installing. Not similar railings, identical. Same manufacturer, same color, same configuration, installed by the same contractor. Patricia had been collecting rental income on a property with the illegal railings she was attempting to foreclose on me for installing. The violation records told the complete story. The previous owners, a young couple named the Garcias, had received their first railing citation 4 years ago. The fines escalated monthly, $750, $2,500, $3,000, until they faced foreclosure. Rather than lose everything, they sold to the first cash buyer, PM Properties. Patricia's signature appeared on every violation notice, every fine escalation, every board decision that drove the Garcias into financial desperation. Then I discovered the insurance records that made my blood boil. PM Properties had filed a homeowner's insurance claim for hail damage to those same railings 8 months after purchase. They'd collected $12,000 for replacing railings that supposedly violated HOA standards. Patricia had been operating a protection racket disguised as community standards enforcement. The scope was breathtaking. Over 5 years, PM Properties had acquired properties worth $520,000 at 65 cents on the dollar, a profit of $182,000 through systematic HOA harassment. Every targeted homeowner matched the same profile: elderly, minority, working class, or rental properties. People without resources to sustain extended legal battles. People who would sell cheaply rather than face foreclosure. I cross-referenced Patricia's insurance adjuster license with the property sales. She'd been the insurance adjuster for 2 of the distressed sales, collecting fees on properties her HOA harassment had devalued, triple dipping on her own corruption. But the most incriminating evidence was a report I found in the county's digital filing system. Patricia had submitted a complaint about declining property values due to non-conforming improvements the same month her LLC purchased the Washington house. She'd literally cited her own discrimination as justification for below-market property acquisition. Federal investigators love patterns, and Patricia had provided them a 6-year timeline of criminal enterprise: conspiracy, mail fraud, wire fraud, housing discrimination, racketeering. She'd violated enough federal laws to stock a federal courthouse. I called Lisa Park at 5 a.m., knowing she'd want this information immediately. "Lisa, I found the mother lode. Patricia's been operating a real estate fraud using HOA authority. We're not just discussing discrimination anymore. What are we discussing? Criminal conspiracy spanning 6 years and over $500,000 in fraudulent property manipulation. Patricia thought she was collecting rent checks. She was actually collecting federal evidence. The morning following my discovery, Lisa Park scheduled an emergency conference. Her law office conference room smelled like premium coffee and impending justice as she spread my property research across a table that had probably witnessed its share of David versus Goliath confrontations. "David, what you've uncovered isn't simply HOA abuse, it's organized crime." Lisa's eyes gleamed with the intensity of a prosecutor who'd discovered her career-defining case. Patricia's been operating a systematic racketeering operation using municipal authority as her weapon. Within hours, she'd assembled what appeared to be a legal special forces unit. Michelle Torres, a forensic accountant who specialized in financial fraud. Stephen Kim, a federal housing discrimination specialist. And the heavy artillery, Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Rodriguez, who prosecuted public corruption cases for the Eastern District of Wisconsin. The strategy session felt like observing a master plumber plan a complex repiping job. Every connection mapped, every valve traced, every potential leak point identified. "Here's how we dismantle Patricia's operation," Lisa explained, pointing to a timeline that now occupied an entire wall. "Federal RICO charges require proving a pattern of criminal activity. We have 6 years of systematic property manipulation. That's our pattern." Michelle, the forensic accountant, had been analyzing PM Properties' financial records with the enthusiasm of someone who lived for spreadsheet forensics. "The money trail is gorgeous in its transparency," she announced. "Patricia and Paul use the same banking account for HOA assessments and rental property purchases. Every property acquisition directly correlates with HOA enforcement actions. But we needed more than financial records. We needed victims willing to testify, and that meant locating people Patricia had driven away. Robert Kim became our intelligence asset. Despite being 71 and terrified of Patricia's retaliation, he'd maintained detailed records of every neighborhood harassment campaign. More importantly, he'd preserved relationships with families who'd escaped Maple Ridge. The Garcias relocated to Arizona after Patricia destroyed them, Robert whispered during one of our garage strategy sessions. The Johnsons moved back to Chicago. The Williams family went to Tennessee, but they all maintained documentation because they suspected something wasn't legitimate. I spent the following week playing detective, tracking down former neighbors across 4 states. Each phone conversation revealed the identical pattern. Systematic harassment followed by forced sale to PM Properties. The Garcias wept when I explained that their harassment hadn't been random misfortune, but calculated criminal targeting. "We lost everything," Mrs. Garcia told me over a crackling phone connection. 15 years building equity vanished because we couldn't afford attorneys to fight manufactured violations. Stephen Kim, our housing specialist, was constructing the federal discrimination case with methodical precision. He'd analyzed demographics of every HOA enforcement action spanning 10 years. The statistics were damning. 96% of major violations targeted minority or working-class families. 0 enforcement against country club members or insurance professionals. Patricia didn't just discriminate, Stephen explained. She weaponized discrimination for profit. That elevates this from civil rights violation to criminal conspiracy. Meanwhile, Assistant U.S. Attorney Rodriguez was coordinating with FBI Financial Crimes Division. Apparently, Patricia's operation had triggered multiple federal databases. Wire fraud alerts from suspicious property transfers, mail fraud flags from HOA violation notices, banking irregularities from cash transactions exceeding reporting thresholds. "She's been on our watch list for 8 months, Rodriguez admitted. "Your case provides the missing component, proof of criminal intent and systematic operation." The evidence organization consumed my entire garage. 4 long tables covered with chronological timelines, property records, financial transactions, and victim testimonies. It resembled a federal investigation headquarters complete with colored string connecting related incidents. Kevin assisted after school, his teenage precision perfect for cross-referencing dates and dollar amounts. Dad, Patricia's like a really evil real estate investor who creates her own distressed properties, he observed while highlighting bank transfers. That's exactly what she is, son. But the most satisfying moment occurred when we researched Patricia's insurance adjuster license history. She'd faced disciplinary action in 2016 for undisclosed conflicts of interest, adjusting claims for properties owned by her relatives without proper disclosure. The state insurance commission had suspended her license for 4 months. Patricia was a repeat offender who'd learned to conceal her schemes more effectively. Lisa was preparing a lawsuit that read like a federal crime thriller. Federal RICO charges, mail fraud, wire fraud, housing discrimination, conspiracy, insurance fraud, and approximately 15 other felonies I couldn't pronounce. The damage calculations alone approached 7 figures. We're not merely seeking compensation for you, Lisa explained. We're dismantling a 10-year criminal enterprise and establishing precedent for HOA accountability nationwide. The strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Present Patricia with irrefutable evidence of her criminal operation. Offer one opportunity for settlement before federal prosecutors filed charges. Let her choose between paying substantial damages or facing 30 years in federal prison. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rodriguez smiled when Lisa outlined our approach. I love cases where the defendant documented their own crimes. Patricia's been constructing our prosecution case for 6 years. 6 months of investigation had revealed the truth. Patricia Moorfield wasn't simply a neighborhood bully. She was the leader of a criminal organization that happened to masquerade as an HOA. Patricia's desperation manifested like a burst pipe spraying chaos in all directions. The morning after news leaked about the federal investigation, I discovered a private investigator stationed outside my house. Some sketchy individual in a dented Honda taking photographs of Kevin boarding the school bus. That violated every boundary I had. I walked directly to his car window, my work boots crunching on gravel loud enough to wake the neighborhood. You want to explain why you're photographing my 17-year-old son? The PI lowered his window, cigarette smoke escaping like guilty evidence. Just performing a job, buddy. Public street, public photography. Whose job? He smirked and drove away without responding. But I didn't need confirmation. Patricia was deploying private investigator tactics now, searching for dirt that didn't exist. By lunch, the harassment campaign was fully operational. The PI had visited 5 neighbors inquiring about my fitness as a parent and whether Kevin appeared neglected due to his father's legal troubles. Robert Kim called immediately. David, some terrible man, was asking if you have drinking problems, if you host inappropriate visitors, if Kevin looks properly nourished and supervised. Robert's voice shook with indignation. I told him to leave my property before I contacted authorities. Patricia's strategy was transparent. If you can't win on evidence, destroy your opponent's reputation. But she'd underestimated Maple Ridge's evolution. The neighbors she'd terrorized for years had discovered their courage. Mrs. Rodriguez from Oak Avenue, the hospital administrator's wife, called that evening. David, that investigator attempted to extract information about your character. I told him you're the finest neighbor we've ever had, and if he returned, my husband would have hospital security remove him from the premises. Even more gratifying was the call from James Washington. Hey man, some PI was asking about you. I told him you helped me repair my water heater for free last summer, and anyone targeting you was targeting the entire community. The community Patricia had spent years fragmenting was consolidating against her, but Patricia wasn't finished with her arsenal of dirty tactics. Thursday morning brought a visit from Child Protective Services. A well-intentioned social worker named Ms. Thompson stood on my doorstep with a clipboard and genuine concern. Mr. Chen, we received an anonymous report about possible neglect. Someone claimed your son appears undernourished and your home environment is chaotic due to ongoing legal issues. I invited her in for coffee and showed her my evidence room, now transformed into a federal case command center. Ms. Thompson's eyes widened as she examined the organized timeline, professional legal documents, and systematic approach to fighting corruption. Sir, whoever reported this was either misinformed or vindictive. Your home demonstrates clear evidence of a dedicated parent fighting for his family's rights. She closed her notepad. Case dismissed, and between you and me, continue fighting the good fight. Patricia's attacks were backfiring spectacularly. Friday brought the financial warfare. Someone again couldn't prove it, but obviously reported my plumbing business to the state licensing board for operating without proper credentials and performing hazardous work in residential areas. The inspector who responded was a guy named Tom Martinez, 25-year veteran who'd encountered every scam imaginable. He spent an hour reviewing my license, insurance, work permits, and customer references. David, your documentation's cleaner than most contractors I inspect. Someone's playing games with you. Tom shook his head. I'm noting this as a frivolous complaint filed with malicious intent. That becomes part of the permanent record. By Saturday, Patricia's desperation reached peak absurdity. She attempted to have my van towed from my own driveway, claiming it violated residential parking regulations. The towing company contacted me for verification before connecting cables. "Sir, we have a woman here demanding we tow your vehicle, but you're parked legally on your own property. She seems quite agitated. Should we contact police?" "Absolutely. Please do." 30 minutes later, Officer Maria Santos was writing Patricia a citation for filing false reports and harassment. Watching Patricia attempt to explain her actions to a uniformed police officer while neighbors gathered on their porches was the most entertainment Maple Ridge had experienced in years. "Ma'am, this is your 4th complaint this week involving Mr. Chen. I'm recommending you consult legal counsel about harassment statutes before this escalates further." That evening, Lisa Park called with an update that made my month. Patricia's attorney has been contacting our office twice, daily requesting settlement negotiations. They recognize the federal case is bulletproof. What are they proposing? Started at $15,000, now they're at $75,000, plus her resignation from all HOA positions. Lisa's satisfaction was audible. Patricia's hemorrhaging money on legal fees and private investigators while her case deteriorates hourly. But the most revealing sign of Patricia's panic occurred Sunday morning. Kevin spotted her driving slowly past our house at sunrise, staring at the federal investigation warning signs Lisa had posted in our windows. "Dad, she looks terrified. Patricia Moorfield should be terrified. She'd spent 10 years terrorizing neighbors with immunity. Now she was experiencing what it felt like to be the target." Patricia's final desperation play arrived on a Wednesday morning that began ordinary and ended with police sirens. I was drinking coffee when Officer Santos knocked on my door, her expression apologetic but official. "David, I regret doing this, but Patricia Moorfield filed a restraining order petition claiming you've been stalking and threatening her. Judge Martinez wants to see you in chambers at 3 Camihuelas p.m. Stalking. The woman who'd hired a PI to photograph my son was claiming I was stalking her. Officer Santos, I have security cameras covering my entire property. Want to review 10 weeks of footage proving I haven't been anywhere near Patricia's residence. Save it for the judge. But between us, her story has more holes than Swiss cheese." At the courthouse, Patricia sat beside a new attorney, her 5th one since this began. She'd clearly invested money in appearance coaching because the confident insurance adjuster, gay high,